Blizzard
you know,
over the gavel. All right, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the San Rafael Planning Commission on Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. And this meeting is called to order, and I'll request if staff can please take roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Davidson?
Here.
Commissioner Hill?
Here.
Commissioner Lubomirsky? Commissioner Previtali?
Here.
Commissioner Saudi? Vice Chair Samutzi?
Here.
Chair Mercado?
Here.
So I'm showing Commissioner Lubomirsky absent. And I do know that he's going to show up a little bit late. And then Commissioner Saudi is also absent.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we'll move on to the order of the agenda. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda from any of the commissioners? Nope. Okay. So we'll continue with the agenda next. Public notification of the meeting procedures. Due to COVID-19 shelter-in-place order, we've had to establish new ways of conducting our public meetings. I'd like to ask if staff can please address how the public comment will work this evening.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we are accepting public comments over the telephone and through YouTube live chat. In addition, we are now offering closed captioning streaming of this meeting. The link to the closed captioning service can be found in the YouTube live chat box. In this meeting is being streamed via live via YouTube, where members of the community can provide public comments on agenda items in the YouTube live chat at www.youtube.com/City of San Rafael. Here you will find a link to tonight's meeting. We also have the option for community members to attend via conference call at the following phone number, 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID for this number is 872-0645-4435#. Or you can also log on through Zoom. If you are participating by telephone and you wish to provide comment, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period for the item you'd like to speak on. This virtually raises your hand and notifies me that you're interested in speaking. Once it is your turn, you're going to hear notification that the host is inviting you to participate. At that time, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak, introduce yourself first, and then you will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak. Please make sure you have all the volume on all your devices that you're watching YouTube live on turned down so that you don't receive feedback or audio delay. If you are submitting public comments on YouTube live, you can enter public comments in the live chat box to let us know that you want your comments read out loud. First, you'll want to start with writing in capital letters, public comment. Prior to your comment, you're going to introduce yourself and let us know if you are speaking on an agenda item or a non-agenda item. Comments in the chat are limited to 3 minutes worth of text. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to type your chat into, you may need to do more than one chat because there's a 200 character limit, and you may need to submit those. We have somebody that will collect those and read them out loud as one comment. Words including profanity, obscenity, or discriminatory language that disturbs the decorum of the meeting will not be read into the record. If you submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, it has been forwarded to the Planning Commission and published to our website. For more information regarding real-time public comments, please visit our live commenting pilot page at www.cityofsanrafael.org/live-commenting-pilot.
Great, thank you, Ellie. Okay, next I will describe the meeting procedures. We're going to begin with the staff report, then we'll hear from the applicant, and we'll ask to keep that about 10 minutes. Then we'll hear from members of the public, which is where those folks will be invited to speak. We'll read any comments that are made on YouTube live chat, and people in the conference call can speak when they receive the notification, remembering to keep their comments from 2 to 3 minutes. Commission will then have the opportunity to ask questions of staff, the applicant, or the public. and we'll then close the public hearing, bring it back for our discussion, deliberation, and action if necessary. So next is urgent communications. Is there anyone that has an urgent communication not on a topic of the agenda tonight?
If there's anyone in the conference call or through Zoom that wishes to provide public comment on a topic not on the agenda, you may press 9 on your phone or click the participants tab and select raise hand through Zoom to virtually raise your hand. Once it's your turn, you will hear a notification that the host has invited you to participate. At that time, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak. First, introduce yourself, and you'll be allotted 3 minutes to speak. Please make sure you turn your volume off on any other device that you have on. So I'll go ahead and so while I wait to see if there's anyone interested in talking, I'll look to see if there's a, I'll ask if there's any chat being submitted.
No comments on YouTube.
Okay. And I do not see anyone in the participation room, so.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. All right, next we'll move on to consent calendar, which is one item, and that's the minutes from our December 15th, 2020 Planning Commission hearing. And it looks like we will ask if there's any public comment on the consent calendar.
Again, if there's anyone in the conference call that wishes to provide comment, go ahead and press *9 to virtually raise your hand. Once it's your turn, you're going to hear a notification that the host is inviting you to participate. At that time, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak. First, introduce yourself, and then you will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. Please make sure you turn volumes off on any device so that we don't hear feedback. I'm looking, I don't see anyone in the chat, and I'm looking to see if there's anybody that's provided chat comments. And it looks like there's not. So we do not have anyone asking to comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, any commissioners have any comments or edits? And if not, then we can entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of December 15, 2020.
Second.
Great, motion second. I guess we'll take roll call if we can, Allie.
Okay. So Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Privatali?
Yes.
Vice Chair Samuzzi? And Chair Mercado?
Yes. Great. Next we'll move on to the public hearing. And now we'll move on to our first discussion item, and this is the annual meeting of the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission for 2021 to include A, election of officers, B, review of the Planning Commission rules and procedures, and lastly, selection of liaisons to design review board meetings. So recommended action for tonight is to elect a new chair and vice chair for 2021, accept the changes to the Planning Commission rules and procedures, and then select our liaison. So if we have a staff report, we appreciate it.
Sure, we'll keep it really brief. So every year the rules and procedures require an annual meeting of the Planning Commission where the commission elects a chair and vice chair. The office of the chair and vice chair is rotational with selection based on seniority and tenure. In the event that the years of service are identical, tenure will be determined by alphabetical order. And based on this criteria, the next in line for chair is Commissioner Samuzzi or Vice Chair Samuzzi, and the next in line for vice chair is Commissioner Privatali. So the annual meeting is also provides an opportunity for the Planning Commission to review the rules and procedures and consider adoption or revisions if they deem necessary. Staff has prepared a list of edits to the rules and procedures ahead of tonight's meeting that relate to how to handle virtual meetings. If there are any others that the Planning Commission wishes to consider, this would be the time to recommend those as well. Lastly, the annual meeting is a time to select commissioners to serve as liaisons to the Design Review Board meetings for the calendar year. It's unclear what this year will look like, whether we'll start holding meetings, whether virtually or in person, but it would be wise to go ahead and select a liaison for each of the meetings so that we have we're already prepared. So the way I would like to recommend the steps to occur is first, elect a chair and vice chair by separate motions and votes. Second, the Planning Commission should take action on the rules and procedures. And then lastly, I would recommend that the Planning Commission select liaisons through a volunteer process, and that be done by roll call to expedite the volunteering. And that's it. That completes my report.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's open this up for public comment if we have any.
So is there anyone in the conference call that wishes to provide public comment on this agenda item? And if so, please press *9 to virtually raise your hand. Once it is your turn to hear, you're going to hear a notification that you're invited to participate. At that time, you're going to press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak and introduce yourself. You'll be allotted 3 minutes to speak. Please make sure to have the volume down so we don't hear feedback or an audio delay. And I do not see anyone in the chat, so I will ask if there's anyone in YouTube live chat. It does not look like there is anybody.
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll close public comment, bring it back. And looks like staff's first request is then to either deliberate or make a motion on the chair and the vice chair for next year. Allie, do you want to set that up first, and then we'll go through the rules and procedures?
Sure. So the selection I would recommend that you would select the chair by a motion and a second, and then take the vote of the commissioners.
Okey doke. So
I will try to do that if that's okay. I will move to nominate Vice Chair Samudzi as chair for 2021 and Commissioner Prevatelli as vice chair for 2021.
I'll second. All right.
And it would be appropriate to have a discussion if the commissioner is, or the Planning Commission is interested. Otherwise, I will take roll call.
I just want to say, I know my year was a little short, even though my year was very long. So thank you, staff and Allie, because you guys, props to Rafi and as well, and everyone for helping out. So I appreciate that even the opportunity to stay on to do another year was floated. And I thought about it, but I think since I took over in March, my year has come and gone. And honestly, the secret of this has been staff behind it. So and I think Commissioner Samudzi is ready to rock and roll, who he's helped me out many times in technology. So Commissioner Prevatelli, do be on your toes, because I've learned a few times the internets go out and you end up needing to jump in. So anyways, thanks everybody. It's been a lot of transition, but I've enjoyed it, and I'm happy to hand off the gavel this year.
Yeah, I want to offer some words of gratitude to you, Chair Mercado. On more than few occasions, I thought that you very effectively and gracefully handled several situations that required your authority, and just generally handled things like a read, bend but never break. So thank you for your leadership.
Thanks. Yeah. So Allie, do you want to take a roll call on that, or do we want to make all the motions, presuming that they're all can be on the same and then
We'll
make it.
we'll take a roll call on this. I think that would be the more appropriate, and then have them all to be separate.
Okay.
Would it be, may I say a couple of words before we take a roll call, Chair Mercado? I wanted to thank you as well before the gavel changes. I agree, you have done a phenomenal job. I don't think that you realized the job that you were taking when you jumped in February, almost immediately. It was a completely different type of planning commission, and nobody would have been prepared for that. And you jumped in immediately and handled everything amazingly. And I want to thank you on behalf of staff.
Thanks.
So yeah, I'd be happy to take roll call. Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Privatali?
Yes.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Samudzi?
Yes.
And Chair Mercado?
Yes.
At this time, I would then, looks like Chair Samudzi takes over as the chair, or Vice Chair Samudzi takes over as the chair, and Commissioner Privatali takes over as vice chair. So for the next
Great.
items on the rules and procedures, the commission should make a motion and a second.
I make a motion to accept the rules and procedures as presented by staff.
I'll second.
And is there a discussion that the planning commission would like to have? I can go ahead and take roll call if you would like, Chair Samudzi.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, could you please go ahead and take roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Mercado?
Yes.
Vice Chair Privatali?
Yes.
And Chair Samudzi?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the last item, Chair Samudzi, would be the selection of liaisons to the Design Review Board. And by my recommendation was that we do that by roll call of the commission. If you are in agreement, I can go ahead and do the roll call on that.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Vice Chair Samudzi, Commissioner Davidson. We have January, February, March, April, May, or June that you can select as a DRB liaison for the year.
I guess I'll take January, February.
Okay.
We take 3 months or 2?
We take, oh, I'm missing a few dates. We take 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do January, February.
Okay. Commissioner Hill?
I'm not going anywhere, so I will do March, April.
Okay. And I don't think Commissioner Lubomirsky is here yet. Vice Chair Privatali?
May and June.
Commissioner Mercado?
So I'm looking at right now I only see the months through June.
Yeah, so obviously the next one would be July, August.
It's going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. Or you can choose the September, October, or November, December.
I'll do the next month, July, August.
Okay. Okay, and what I would do is bring this back next meeting and have the other two commissioners submit their volunteer dates.
Okay, so that'll be added to the agenda for next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ellie, I had an inquiry on that. If for whatever reason a commissioner has to recuse on a specific issue, say due to buffer zone, do we just request that someone else take over by volunteer, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically what commissioners will do is if there is a meeting that they're unable to make, you can make arrangements with another commissioner. Or if there's an item where you feel like you need to recuse yourself, you can also do the same thing. You can reach out to another commissioner. Through me, you would contact me and I would help you make that arrangement.
Thank you.
And then the last thing I wanted to say with this, because it's not a formal action, we would next time we meet, we would have the other commissioners provide their volunteer times during the director's report. So that concludes the item number 2.
All right, thank you for that. So now we'll move on to the first item for public hearing and the second discussion item. And this public hearing is to review the downtown precise plan and reviewing the draft downtown precise plan. So recommended action from staff is to accept the report and continue the hearing to January 26, 2021 for the form-based code discussion. At this point, I'll ask staff to get us kicked off on this discussion item.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Samudzi. So for this item, I'd like to introduce the Opticos team along Stefan Pellegrini, along with the Opticos team. Stefan and his team have been working on the downtown specific plan for the past couple of years, and they have really worked hard on this. There's a lot of information to get from them. So we broke up the meetings into 3 different sections. The first is the bulk of the downtown precise plan, kind of the more the bigger picture of the policy discussion. Next meeting, you're going to get a presentation related to the form-based code. This would be the regulating document for the city. And then we're leaving another meeting open as an option so that if we need to do a wrap-up, that will occur the first meeting in February. Depending on how things go in the next couple of weeks, we may come back at a future date rather than doing the wrap-up in February. We may postpone it a little bit longer to allow some more collaboration. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and allow Stefan to provide the presentation of the downtown precise plan.
Great, thank you very much, Ali. And good evening, Chair Samudzi and Vice Chair Prabhatali and members of the Planning Commission. I'm going to share my screen and bring up a few slides that we've prepared for tonight's presentation. Great, so hopefully you can all see that. Again, my name is Stefan Pellegrini. I am principal with Opticos Design, and as Ali mentioned, we've been working closely with staff and Barry Miller and the community over the last couple of years, and are pleased to present the Downtown Precise Plan to you this evening. And as Ali mentioned, this is the first of 2 discussions that we look forward to having. One, tonight I'll be sharing with you information on chapters 1 through 8. And then in our subsequent meeting, we'll provide a deeper dive on the regulatory framework in the form-based code, which is included in chapter 9 of the document. So hopefully the slides have advanced for all of you. This is what I'll be talking about tonight. I'm going to give you a summary, short summary of the progress that we've made to date and the key milestones during the process. I'll spend a little bit of time introducing the structure and organization of the plan. And then I'm going to hone in on some of the highlights of the document, again, focusing on chapters 1 through 8. And I look forward to your questions, discussion this evening, as well as discussion and questions from community members who might be listening. So as Ali mentioned, we actually started in January of 2019 with kicking off the project. We had an opportunity to engage with really many different groups in the city. And one of the most significant pieces of putting this together occurred in May of 2019 when we held a multi-day design charrette in downtown San Rafael and had an opportunity to engage with and talk to hundreds of people over a short period of time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that this evening. You can see here some of the other key milestones getting toward establishing some options for the downtown project area, moving those through discussion and finalization through the Planning Commission and the City Council last year, and then moving on to preparing the draft precise plan and code, working together closely with staff. And so that we've arrived at this sort of milestone that you see today with the public review draft being completed. So a little bit about what the precise plan and the code do. The precise plan is a guiding document that sets policies and standards for the downtown. It seeks to prioritize public investment and also establish regulations for private development. And the policy and regulations are both working together to achieve an established community vision that sort of came out of the public process. So to that end, the plan includes design principles that help to define the community vision. It includes guiding policies and expected outcomes that can be used to aid decision-making. And it provides strategies in the forms of recommendations and policy direction to achieve plan goals, as well as implementing actions that are really seen as required steps to realize the precise plan vision. And this all works in concert with Chapter 9, which is the Downtown Form-Based Code, which, as Ali mentioned, is the regulatory framework for future development in the downtown project area and will function as the zoning document for downtown. So as I go through the slides tonight, you will see in the upper right-hand corner on many of these slides a little post-it note, and this is to sort of guide and provide some direction to the components of the plan to which we'll be referring. So when I talk about key themes here, these can be found in an in-depth discussion of these themes found in the vision summary located in Chapter 1 of the document. These are themes that arose from the planning process, working closely with the community and with community stakeholders. There are themes to recalibrate the role of downtown from what it has really been, which is a retail and employment district, to more of a mixed-use center that incorporates housing and services that are supportive of housing. So we see the promotion of housing in the downtown and that housing to meet a variety of needs and lifestyle choices. There is information and direction to foster a continued sense of identity through focused public improvements and investments in key downtown locations. Attention to downtown's history and heritage with regards to the historic resources that are found in the downtown project area, while balancing that with the encouragement of new development. There's direction to create a high quality public realm with specific attention to how pedestrians and bicycles move through the downtown area. There is information that seeks to ensure that future development is resilient to the longer term impacts of climate change and sea level rise. And there's information and direction to create and establish a more predictable development review process that can ideally allow for the streamlining of future project proposals within the downtown. So the plan is actually organized into 9 chapters. As I mentioned, we're going to go through a brief summary of chapters 1 through 8 tonight. Chapter 9 will be subject of our subsequent meeting with all of you. And the plan also includes a variety of appendices as well as definitions in the form of a glossary. And I will refer to some of those this evening as we summarize the precise plan. So at this point, I'm going to transition to some of the key chapter highlights. I'm going to first talk about chapters 1 through 3, and then I'll switch over to chapters 4 through 8. Chapters 1 through 3 include information on introducing the plan. They provide background on the community engagement process. Chapter 2 provides information on existing conditions within the downtown planning area. And Chapter 3 establishes both design principles and guiding policies. I mentioned a little bit about the community outreach process. This is summarized in section 1.3 of the plan. A key apex of the process was the public design charrette that was held in May of 2019. We had an opportunity to engage with hundreds of participants who came by our open studio located in downtown San Rafael. We were open to the public for both informal and formal conversations for over 11 hours over a course of a few days. And we incorporated that with a series of key focus group meetings, as well as ongoing presentations to the general plan steering committee that really served as sort of a guiding star for the development of the precise plan. Leading up to the design and visioning efforts, there was a substantial work on existing conditions that was done. This is summarized in chapter 2 of the document. This includes information on demographics, on market conditions that are underlying in the project area, the identification of key challenges and opportunities, and is really seen as sort of a preamble and a precursor to the establishment of the design principles that are included in chapter 2 that seek to reflect the existing conditions, address these challenges, and consider them as opportunities. The key opportunities and challenges that are described in chapter 2 are listed here. We understand that downtown San Rafael is in a key central location in the region and is a really sort of diverse center of jobs and economic activity. It has really authentic character, which is unparalleled in the region with regards to its historic, cultural, and community assets, as well as its natural setting and its climate. And it is a major transportation hub with both access by bus and rail and a great potential for mixed-use development. This is offset by many challenges that we see in the downtown, including constrained development patterns that limit infill opportunities, issues with transportation facilities that create barriers to connectivity in the form of high traffic arterials and other infrastructure such as freeways and railways. There were issues that I will go into tonight with regards to the unclear status of historic resources in the downtown, as well as longer term concerns about climate change and sea level rise, changes to retail and the evolution of retail trends and that impact that it may have on retail resources in the downtown, as well as current issues that are impacting downtown San Rafael, as well as communities across the Bay Area with regards to homelessness and safety. In Chapter 3, Section 3.1, the document provides information on key design principles, which are seen as guiding principles for the plan. These are described and elaborated through a series of guiding policies that are followed by a series of expected outcomes. So you can see the 8 design principles here that seek to respond to the existing conditions and the key challenges and opportunities that were established. And then this chapter provides a more in-depth discussion of each of those design principles with regards to guiding policies, as well as expected outcomes that can be expected with the implementation of these policies. Chapter 4 provides some information on what we refer to as the design vision. This chapter sort of encapsulates the anticipated program that could be established through the build out of the vision in the precise plan. The plan anticipates approximately 2,200 units of new development and about 700,000 square feet of non-residential development. And you can see how that translates based on some assumptions that are listed in the plan to a new residential downtown population of about 3,800 people and about 2,000 new jobs. This is broken out into a series of sub areas, and I'll talk a little bit more about those shortly. And you can see some of the key components of the design vision here. And I refer to section 4.1 of the plan for a more in-depth discussion on these topics. So this plan provides some direction for what we refer to as the design vision or the illustrative vision. This is a bird's eye view image that shows where the plan considers potential infill opportunities to be, where there is opportunities for new development to occur in the forms of infill, and those are noted in red. You can also see projects that are currently in the pipeline in orange, as well as both the existing and proposed framework of public and open spaces in the downtown area. And the way that this vision seeks to be implemented is through the regulating plan, which really functions as the zoning map for downtown and provides the key framework for the development standards that are described in Chapter 9. So I won't talk about this too much in detail tonight, since that'll be the topic of our subsequent meeting, but this does establish a range of appropriate intensities, different shades of mixed use within the downtown, and it provides information with regards to intensity as well as form and character. And here, when I started to use the word intensity, what I am largely talking about is building height. The key way that the plan thinks about intensity is through building height. And so this, you can see that is sort of encapsulated here. Each of the 4 principal zone districts that the plan provides are accompanied by both a base height that is expected for basic projects, as well as a bonus height that might be achievable through meeting 1 or more stipulated incentives in the plan. And this is a sort of a key feature that we'll have an opportunity to sort of talk about a little bit more at our subsequent meeting, but I do want to sort of give you an introduction to that tonight. That's encapsulated here. You can also refer to section 4.2. And this again describes the range of zone districts that are anticipated in the downtown, as well as their base height and their height that can be achieved as a bonus height through 1 or more incentives that the plan provides. This summary table also provides information with regards to the anticipated built character in each zone. particularly with regards to the building's orientation to the street and the sidewalk, as well as the term that we use, frontage, which is how the building meets the street, which in some situations might be a residential frontage. You can imagine a building engaging the street with a porch or a stoop. In many places, we have mixed use frontage where buildings are engaging the back of the sidewalk with shop fronts and active transparent ground floor uses. Section chapter 4 also provides information on heights in the form of this heights map that you see here. You can see how this actually functions with the incentive program to sort of achieve bonus heights. And these are divided into 3 general tiers. Tier 1 is an area predominantly in the west end and in the northern portions of the project area, where an additional 10 feet or 1 story of development may be attained either through affordable projects or the provision of particular kinds of community benefits. Tier 2 that we see in the downtown core is an area where incentives of up to 20 feet or 2 stories might be achievable. And state law is also applicable here. Projects that are within a half mile of the downtown transit center, considering both the SMART station and the San Rafael bus transit center. Those 100% affordable projects within that range through state law can achieve a 3-story or 33-foot height bonus. And so what we want to do with the zoning envelope is really anticipate and incorporate the incentives that density bonus programs allow in order to really make sure that those kinds of projects have a predictable outcome. And I hope to sort of talk a little bit more about that when we focus on Chapter 9. Chapter 4 also provides information on the expected public realm framework. This includes locations for parks and plazas, as well as key streets and passages that are slated for improvements. There's also a discussion of natural systems that can be improved, particularly to improve and mitigate longer term issues that may arise with regards to flooding and stormwater retention due to the longer term impacts of climate change. So I'll talk a little bit about the different sub areas that are summarized in Chapter 4. These start with the sort of downtown core, which includes the historic downtown core located along 4th Street. It includes the West End Village to the west, the downtown gateway, of course, with the transit center at its heart, as well as the Eastern Montecito neighborhood on the eastern side of 101. Each of these sub-areas in Chapter 4 provides a description of the development program that's anticipated, key information about its built character, transportation and public realm improvements, and a description of sort of key high priority projects. And this is all, again, a descriptive framework that is seen to be implemented with both the policy direction in the implementation plan, as well as the regulatory framework in Chapter 9. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Chapters 5 through 8. Chapter 5 provides a summary of historic resources. This really is sort of a key accomplishment of the plan in that a survey of historic resources in the downtown had not really been completed since two chunks were done, one in the late 1970s and one in the mid 1980s. And so this was one of the key issues with downtown, is that the nature of historic resources in the project area, there was a lot of uncertainty around that, which really led to difficulty in implementing and entitling new development projects. So what we have in Chapter 5 is the establishment of a historic context statement, which helps to explain and communicate what should be considered as historic within the downtown. The downtown precise plan was accompanied by an updated survey and inventory of 572 properties in the downtown area. And through that inventory, 90 new potential resources were identified, as well as 2 sub-areas that could potentially be eligible as historic districts. Chapter 5 also provides information on ways that the historic preservation ordinance can be improved, as well as the Downtown Historic Resources Summary Report, which you can see is referred to here, that forms an appendix to the plan. So in Chapter 5, this is a map of the updated historic resources. You can see the new 71 properties that have been identified as being eligible for historic resources in the dark red color, as well as the 19 buildings that are seen as contributing resources in the pink color, and the dark outlines demonstrate the 2 areas where there is a significant continuity of historic resources to make potentially them eligible for the establishment of historic, districts. This map also includes the existing historic landmarks and districts that were prepared prior to this plan in the dark blue and light blue colors, respectively. So Chapter 5 establishes procedures and processes for the review of and modification of historic resources in the downtown based on their status that's designated in on the historic resources map. And you can refer to section 5.6 for additional information about this topic. It also provides information with regards to both how non-historic projects in the downtown can be reviewed and processed, applications for new construction, for example, how contributing resources, their alterations, additions, and demolitions can be reviewed, as well as direction for individual resources and landmarks. A key feature of the floor-based code that we'll talk about next time is integrating this direction for historic resources to ensure that the code is actually providing much of the regulatory direction that many of these resources need to establish projects that are sensitive to their context. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that in our next meeting. Chapter 6 provides direction for transportation and parking. This chapter really pulls forward a lot of previous work that has been established both through the general plan and through the parking and wayfinding study that did much to establish key policy direction for downtown transportation and parking. This chapter proposes a layered network approach, providing some attention to pedestrian and bicycle streets, some attention to transit streets, and some attention to vehicular priority streets. This in many ways helps with the existing right-of-ways that we have in the downtown area, which are often somewhat narrow, and it helps to prioritize different movements on different streets and prioritize sort of the best allocation of those right-of-ways, depending on their location and their orientation to the downtown plan. So the pedestrian priority network focuses here, you can see on 4th Street, as well as the key north, south, and east-west pedestrian corridors that circulate around 4th Street. The plan in section 6.2 provides direction to improve pedestrian safety and enhance north-south connectivity with particular attention to A and B streets, Tamalpais, Lindaro, and Grand. And much of this work aligns with the city's bicycle and pedestrian master plan, as well as the larger discussion that's occurred through the general plan. The bicycle priority network is illustrated here. There's a focus on both north-south and east-west connectivity, including 4th Street as a key east-west connection as a low-speed shared street, key routes on A Street, E Street, and Grand, and some preliminary direction for how bicycles can be incorporated into 5th Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, and Tamalpais, and recommendations for further study in those locations. And finally, with regards to vehicles and transit, the vehicular network focuses on the one-way couplets on 2nd and 3rd Street and Irwin and Heatherton. It does propose that B Street can be converted to a two-way street, and C and D can be designated as emergency response routes. It also provides direction for the conversion of Francisco Boulevard between 2nd Street and Rice Drive to be converted to a one-way route that can incorporate a parallel bicycle facility, and a discussion about potential reconfiguration of the West End Gateway at 2nd and 4th Street. Transit priority is really focused on the Irwin and Heatherton couplet and connection to the freeway corridor, as well as considerations for 4th Street to continue as the main east-west bus route through downtown. Street transformations that are described in this section are actually described with these illustrations that you can see starting with section 6.4. This section provides information on existing conditions as well as their near-term potential transformations and what might happen over the longer term with a subsequent investment to these streets. Chapter 7 includes information on affordable housing and anti-displacement. This chapter provides an analysis of the existing policies and programs and provides a discussion of potential new strategies that can be implemented to promote affordable housing and protect tenants in the downtown project area. It includes a discussion of the existing affordable housing stock, as well as what's anticipated through the current housing element cycle, which ends in 2023 and anticipates that there are 1,000 units that are likely to be met through projects that are either built within the cycle or under construction or in the pipeline. And so that is significant. As I mentioned, the precise plan anticipates a program in addition of that housing element that could serve the subsequent cycle that will start after 2023. Housing production strategies include enhancing the downtown height bonus through the regulatory framework that I described earlier. It provides guidance to reduce parking and expand the parking district, which is described in Chapter 6, to incentivize new development. It provides a framework for streamlined development review for projects that actually meet the form-based code. And it describes some other strategies that could potentially be used to incentivize new development in the downtown, including air rights development over historic properties, for example, land write-downs to reduce the cost of new housing projects, as well as innovative housing types. There's also a discussion of tenant protection strategies in this chapter to maintain tenant protection and protect tenants from eviction or the loss of affordable units over time. And lastly, Chapter 8 provides a framework for implementation. This is described as a roadmap. You'll see that many of the projects that are described in chapters 4, 5, and 6 are encapsulated here in this chapter as key priority implementation items. They are designated as in terms of their timing and their priority, as well as potential funding sources which can be used and directed towards the fulfillment of those priority projects. This map in section 8.1 sort of provides a summary of what's seen as some of those priority projects. I want to focus on just sort of the first few here as we discussed with you this evening. The plan describes key improvements at the downtown gateway, which would include first and last mile improvements to the SMART station and the transit center, as well as intersection improvements, including traffic signals and other pedestrian infrastructure to connect folks within the downtown area to the transit facilities. The transit center relocation is a key ongoing project that is described and referenced in the precise plan, and implementing the site and completing the site selection that's currently underway by Golden Gate Transit is a key short-term project priority, as well as sort of implementing the necessary circulation and wayfinding improvements once that location is secured. And the plan also describes some key improvements to the downtown Centerville interchange, which can improve its functionality as well as pedestrian and bicycle crossings and access across the interchange. Chapter 8 also includes an economic development strategy in section 8.2. This provides additional information with regards to prior actions, timeline, and key responsible parties to move forward economic development policies within the downtown. It does provide additional information on potential financing strategies and funding sources, as well as a particular discussion about the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 and some of the potential strategies that might be used to respond to the downtown's recovery once the COVID-19 pandemic is under control, as well as additional recommendations for moving development and economic development forward in the downtown. The recommended actions are also described with regards to historic resources management, affordable housing and anti-displacement, key utility infrastructure, and key moves to adapt to climate change and sea level rise. And the plan also provides direction and steps for how the plan can be monitored over time to measure its success and the enforcement of the plan through its implementation. So that concludes a summary of chapters 1 through 8. And at this time, I look forward to questions and comments and discussion. Thank you for your time this evening.
Sorry, muted again. So at this point, does the commission have questions for staff and or the consulting team?
Just to clarify, are we going to go chapter by chapter after we do some initial comments and public comment, and then we'll go chapter by chapter, or just going to take it in whole?
Well, let me take a temperature check. Do folks here on the commission have a lot of comments or discussion points that they want to cover? Is that a thumbs up?
Yeah, I have probably like 5, and I could go chapter by chapter though.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we just go person by person, since it seems like it's like an even split of people who don't have comments and people that do. And so when you share your comments, just provide comments on all of the chapters in summary. But at this point, do we have questions? Do we have questions for staff and or the consulting team?
A couple of numbers that popped up to me is the estimate of developing 2,200 units in the downtown area in the next 20 years. Is that seems extremely high to me, and I was just wondering how that came about.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner Davidson. So in order to arrive at that number, we looked first at the projects that actually are already in the pipeline. And those include projects that actually have been entitled and may not be yet under construction. And those are pretty substantial. We then looked at sites in the downtown that could be seen as being underutilized, meaning that they were well under the existing zoning envelope that it was possible within the downtown. And these were considered as opportunity sites. Across the project area, we estimated that there is absolutely sort of capacity for about 2,200 units.
Okay. So more capacity than a goal.
Well, and what's important here is that this program number is what was used as an input into measuring the environmental impacts of the general plan. And so it's a measurement of the potential development, and the EIR that's tied to the general plan provides a mitigating framework to anticipate that amount of development. Since development needs to occur on land that is privately owned, the delivery of development is going to depend on many factors. The economy, which as we know goes up and down, ability of private property owners and investors to move on development. What the city can do first and foremost, really their power is in zoning and entitlements. But we felt comfortable with that measurement of the 2,200 units and the 700,000 square foot of non-residential as a potential outcome that could occur over the life of the project.
Okay. And another thing that popped up was on the historic resources, one of the sites that I think is mapped to be eligible as a historic resource is the building on the corner of B and 4th, which is the Wells Fargo Bank. And to me, that was voted like the ugly structure of the city when we had the community meetings, if I remember correctly. I was just wondering if that's kind of a mistake. Honestly, it was voted the ugliest.
No, I appreciate your question, and I'm sort of pulling that up right now. The thing that I want to say about that is that the appendix really sort of describes, there are what are referred to as sort of DPR forms for each of the sites within the downtown that provides information on what establishes them as a historic resource. One of the key things here is that we are measuring buildings that are more than 50 years old.
Oh.
And this is a tricky thing because you know, the Secretary of Interior and state direction on historic resources looks at that measurement as a threshold for the potential of historic resources. But of course, the building that's 50 years old today was built in 1971. And we don't necessarily think immediately that projects that were built in 1971 are historic. But the DPR forms, they touch on a lot of things, including sort of the integrity of the building, its ability to preserve an intact project, you know, that is sort of endured over time, as well as sort of contributions it might make to sort of a larger environment. And all those things sort of come into play when identifying what is a historic resource.
Okay. The other thing I didn't see is the option to close 4th Street entirely to vehicular traffic. I know that was one of the discussions at the very preliminary meetings, and it was sort of like you either really wanted it by people, and then there was like no way. And then COVID hit, and we're doing it, right? Because of the closures, people love it. And I was wondering if that's still an option to be entertained, but the way it's written right now, that's not something that we're going to look into.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There was a lot of discussion about that early on. You know, 4th Street is, you you'll see in the frameworks that it needs to wear a lot of hats, right? Because it's a transit street. It is fronted by retail environment that, even prior to the pandemic, the vehicular access and the ability to sort of park out in front of those businesses and manage the curb was really seen as a desirable feature of the street. But it also has very high pedestrian counts within the downtown, and it has this ongoing use as sort of a festival street that's closed for key events and festivals. So what the plan sort of assumes is that it should continue to play all of those roles. There was a lot of discussion about changing the design of the street to make it more amenable as a sort of pedestrian plaza space, something that actually could more easily convert to sort of a pedestrian zone. But it was seen as something that would, a project that would continue to support that as a temporary feature, that the street could be conducive to closures for short periods of time, as opposed to sort of a 100% conversion from a vehicular street to a pedestrian street. So what the plan tries to sort of describe here is the ability to sort of move towards more of a special designed festival street that that can be converted, or for these temporary conversions, as opposed to sort of a wholesale, like one way, we're going to remove cars from the street and not go back. I would say particularly that the pandemic is creating opportunities all across the Bay Area to think differently about how these streets work. And the word is still out about how much of that should move forward as sort of a longer term policy. It's a difficult thing to consider right now.
I would say that given how much the world has changed in the last 12 months, and given the unknowns on the future of brick and mortar retail, I would hate to be in a position where that could be an option and it's not in the plan, therefore it's sort of dropped and we don't put time into further looking into it, especially if one of our main goals is to be more inviting. I hear what you're saying about the festival, but it may be like a permanent thing that we might want. So I guess, is the way that it's written now something that we're not going to be able to do just because it's not in the plan as an option?
My quick answer would be no. Yeah, it certainly doesn't preclude. Yeah. Okay,
then I guess that's.
Could I just quickly chime in on this, Commissioner Davidson?
Sure.
I completely agree that I think that there's a lot of interest and a lot of potential in making 4th Street, at least a portion of 4th Street, a walking mall, similar to Boulder, Colorado. Has had a lot of success in converting their Pearl Street to a walking mall, both economically and aesthetically and from an entertainment perspective. And so, yeah, I agree with Commissioner Davidson that it would be good to somehow emphasize that as a potential use in the plan. And specifically, one thing that I'm concerned about is what you mentioned, Stefan, about having 4th Street wearing multiple hats, and more specifically about 4th Street becoming a transit priority street and also a bicycle priority street. It seems like having bus routes and also bike lanes on the street, even though the bikes in theory would be going slow, would discourage the use of the street for pedestrian traffic. So I was wondering if it may be feasible to consider at least putting the bus routes and the bicycle routes on some other streets. But I don't want to distract from the overall plan, because I think this is an amazing piece of work. And if you did nothing to it whatsoever, it would be a huge improvement and benefit for the city. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With permission of the chair, if I could just respond, because you raised some key issues. One of the things I just want to mention is that the pedestrian space and the pedestrian activity on 4th Street, the plan sort of sees that sort of at the highest tier. It specifically makes a decision to think about 4th Street not as a street that would have designated bike lanes, where bicyclists might have established an expectation that they can move through with ease and quickness, and instead proposes a shared street environment where there could be, a sharrow on the street, and bicycles are expected to move and circulate within the framework of both pedestrians and cars along the street. And then the many of the buses travel down 4th Street today as they go in and out of the transit center. And that is largely helps because most of the downtown's destinations and the pedestrian activity is also there. So sort of the buses follow that. It is true that the street has to wear many hats, but the pedestrian activity and the potential for pedestrian activity, I think it's important that the plan recognizes that actually is seen at the top of that hierarchy.
Just one last comment. Big picture, I think 2 things are missing, or maybe we can emphasize a lot more in the plan, is engagement of perhaps students. Like there's a great need to educate and partner with schools to bring them into the workforce experience. And I see a lot of opportunity in the way the plan is written for that engagement with students and connect them to help us with perhaps ideas, implementation, use of 4th Street. I think specifically on Chapter 1, community engagement and transportation and affordable housing, we have the Canal neighborhood and San Rafael High School, and I see as multi-pronged. We can educate the youth on our government and the plan, and also provide that ideas to the city. And I think just that partnership should be maybe emphasized. And not only that partnership, but also I think we all know and hear that, partnering is the way to get things done in the future, partnering with private institutions. But if we could emphasize maybe the partnership with banks, financial institutions, to fund these big projects that we historically never have enough funds for, and emphasize the collaboration with all the other agencies, not just the other cities, but like really San Rafael aggressively go out and seek those partnerships with the regional level, state and federal, and really work on, like, this is our #1 project, and it's perhaps not attainable, but when you bring it all the players together, it may. So like an umbrella comment, high school kids, more engagement, providing the education, and then the key partnerships depending on what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. So do we have any other further, and let's just limit it to clarifying questions at this point, because I think it sounds like we have some good discussion points for after the public hearing piece, if this is what it sounds like. But do we have any further questions of clarification for either staff or for the consulting team?
I was just wondering, from an access standpoint, how much of this was translated or made available in other languages, if any?
I'll go ahead and answer that. the plan has not been translated.
I think that'll be probably another useful point of discussion, it sounds like, as well, after the public hearing piece. So hearing no other further questions, let's go ahead and open this up for the public hearing. And staff, could you open up for public comments?
Sure. So if there's anyone in the conference call that wishes to provide public comment on this agenda, please press *9 to virtually raise your hand. Once it is your turn to talk, you will hear a notification that the host is virtually inviting you. At that time, you may press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak. You can start by introducing yourself, and then you will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. Please make sure you have the volume of any other device turned off so that you do not receive feedback or an audio delay. And while I'm waiting for that people to press *9, I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat. And I do see a number of items on here, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. This first comment is from Donnie Uzarski, and it reads, I am concerned about California directives. Is there any way that we, City of San Rafael, can look at pension spending, making huge adjustments? The city has not allowed single-family homes to be built, forcing multi-unit construction, and has dissolved affordable housing. Can we mention Loch Lomond, the pension requirements of public servants that have served us, or have they served themselves? With developers hungry for zero planning or design review. Pensions, 2,200 units in downtown. Which units in the pipeline? Are you considering the humans that have lived here for a very long time? Development requires property owners to move, requires residents to move. More than 50 years old. Let the buildings go. We don't think they are historic. My question is about buildings built in 1890. There are many. Who is this guy? Is he actually aware of how us citizens use this sweet city? Do we want to be a huge city? So much history will be dissolved. Am a 16-year resident. This is dissolves historical importance. Welcoming developers without design review or planning review is wrong, so very wrong. Us residents, we have been here probably longer than you elected folk. And then going on to the next one, this is a chat from Riley Hurd, Marin Academy Land Use Attorney. Great work on the plan. A comment on the maps for the regulating plan and the heights of the bonus plan. The use of the same color palette for makes the legend and the map very difficult to read and use. For example, 8 shades of purple is very hard to differentiate. Also a question, are residential densities called out for the downtown? If not, how will the state density bonus be implemented since it is based off the maximum allowable density for a site? Finally, a portion of forest should definitely be closed to vehicles. Also, European cities have great mechanical bollards that can be extended or retracted at any time for easy street closure. And I'll go ahead and see if there's anybody raising their hand. I do see. I'm going to go ahead and ask Michelle, do you have the ability to unmute? It looks like I do not have.
Yes, sorry. Here we go. It's Jeffrey Rhodes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I have a few comments. First off, I wanted to share with you that along with Berenice, I've served on the 2040 General Plan Steering Committee and also as a member of the Mayor's Downtown Good Design Committee. I'm also a San Rafael Heritage member and Executive Director of Resilient Shore. However, my comments this evening are personal, of a broader nature, and not on behalf of either group. Approximately 4 years ago, I suggested San Rafael consider preparing and adopting a downtown precise plan, similar to the highly effective plan in Redwood City. I'm honored to have served in both places. I wanted to share with you that I support the downtown San Rafael precise plan. I think this is a great start for our city. As in Redwood City, historic preservation has a significant role in placemaking for downtown. It leverages the unique qualities that distinguish San Rafael from other less memorable places. 4th Street and B Street have intact zero setback street walls, characteristic of pre-automotive pedestrian-oriented townscapes. 4th Street is a fine American main street. We also enjoy the good fortune of excellent examples of period architecture from the mid-19th century to the present. These represent the evolution of an authentic and prosperous small city. They are the soul of this place. The precise plan forges a balance between making the best use of what we have while providing a blueprint for downtown's continued evolution. In short, a clear path forward. The current pandemic has placed considerable stress on downtown and other places that are about social interaction and coming together as communities. It's accelerating trends like online shopping and working from home. However, as social beings, we will eventually return to these places that we value, like downtown. If Redwood City's success tells us anything, our downtown will, in addition to automobiles, rely on public and active transportation and rideshare services in order to support growth and change. It also tells us that a significant increase in housing will be necessary for our retail, entertainment, cultural, and food and beverage enterprises to recover and thrive. The precise plan provides the community and project proponents well-crafted development standards and a time-efficient, straightforward approvals process. The objective is to provide clear direction and remove impediments for desirable growth. Precise plan deserves your support. Over the next several weeks, you will have the opportunity to consider adjustments to improve it. And I'm sure a number of us in the community will also share our thoughts. I'd like to thank you all for your services.
Good evening. This is Bill Carney. I'm the chair.
Sorry about that, Bill. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is Bill Carney. I'm the chair of Sustainable San Rafael. And we submitted a letter earlier today. Sorry, it was a little on the late side, but hopefully you'll be able to absorb it. I wanted to highlight just a couple of things. The first is that housing is absolutely key to the success of downtown going forward. And so anything we can do with this plan to attract more housing will serve the activity, will meet a basic need, but also bring great vitality to the downtown over the next 20 years. To do that, and we outlined a couple of places we'd really like to see that happen. One is along 5th Avenue. There seems to be some great potential there, and also 4th Street up by the E Street intersection. If those can become residential zones, that would really add to the character as well as the vitality of the city. To make downtown work as a residential area, and as well as a retail area, it really also needs to be a walkable place. So we put very high priority on the walkability of downtown as key to the success of the plan. And I particularly would direct your attention to the various priorities relative to bike versus pedestrian, and would just lay out as a basic premise that whenever there's a bike-only facility, that it not in any way reduce the dimension of the street that's devoted to pedestrians, to sidewalks. We see some of this happening right now, and it's reflected in the plan also down along 2nd Street. So please pay attention to that as you look through this. And sorry, now I've lost my notes. Yeah, so walkable downtown is absolutely key. The third thing we wanted to stress was the enhancing the connection of nature. And there's a number of ways in which this plan does that. We really encourage all of those, particularly the inclusion of street trees as a part of the complete streets of the city, as well as other street landscaping like bioswales, et cetera, and the creek and wetland restorations that are called for. And very importantly, preserving sunlight on the north side of 4th Street. That's not in the plan right now. We would really urge that to be considered. And overall, we think the plan does a great job and provides a very solid blueprint going forward. Climate change has been mentioned a number of times. There's some specific wetland improvements here along those lines. I would submit that overall, this is the kind of downtown, the kind of city that we really need, where people can live and get transit and walk. That's the kind of city that we really need, adapting to the climate changes and helping to reduce the climate changes that we're now dealing with. So thanks a lot for your consideration. And thank you very much to Barry and Stefan for their fine work in producing this.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, my name is Roger Smith. I'm also, along with Bill and Jeff, I've served on the general plan 2040 and 2020, and I also served back in the early 90s on the downtown vision planning process. So I've been doing this a long time. I'm also I represent the Chamber of Commerce, though I'm not speaking for them in this venue, because I actually, frankly, wasn't expecting to talk. But I think based on what I'm hearing from the commission, I wanted to just focus on one thing, which is the historic resource section of the precise plan. There were seven, I think we all recognize that downtown has to change with the times. I agree with Bill 100% that we need housing to keep it vibrant, to keep it healthy. But that involves changing buildings that were built for other uses, that are mostly obsolete and mostly small scale, and have a lot of economic challenges to bring back into the 21st century. And I think that, unfortunately, I think the historic resource programs that are outlined to protect historic resources get in the way of that. It's another. We've been spending all this time with the seven key themes of the precise plan. If you look at them, they all involve change, but yet the historic resource section presents many subjective hurdles to changing building uses and making it easy for developers and property owners to make the changes that we all want and understand have to happen. And I certainly am not advocating against preserving our historic resources. What I am advocating for is a rethink in those programs of how that can be implemented. I see too much subjectivity. I see too many ways for projects to be delayed. And I think some of you or all of you may recall the discussion about, for example, the Whistle Stop building. I mean, that's a poster child for the kind of hassle that this sort of subjective planning presents, because there's no agreement on the Whistle Stop building. I mean, there's one study that says it's historic, another study that says it's not, and in the meantime, the property owner has no idea what to do, and there's many other. We now have a transit center that may need to go in its place, but that can happen on a smaller scale with smaller buildings. And I just would like to see. I've spent a lot of time with input to the planning department and developing this plan, but I'd like to see more time spent coming up with a more refined version of this. The concept of having a commission of some kind weighing in on what's a historic resource. You need to have in addition to a historic experts, you also need to have property owners on a group like that. It needs to be a balanced group. And in this case, this particular chapter has not seen the light of day. It was not developed with the public. It was developed with a much smaller group. It only has been made public recently, and property owners have no idea that it's in existence and what it might mean to them. And I don't think that is the way San Rafael has operated historically, nor do I think it is the way it should operate going forward. So I guess what I'm suggesting, frankly, and it's an odd idea, but is to pull this chapter out and spend more time making it better. Because again, I don't think the goals are in dispute, but I think the methodology is. Thank you.
Hello?
Leslie, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I am a member of the board of San Rafael Heritage, and Roger, I think, knows me quite well because I take the different point of view. I haven't had a chance to really read the entire thing, but I definitely do not concur on some of the recent historic resource findings in this. Our organization has local knowledge that might be a help to this inventory, but we were unable until now to participate in a meaningful manner. It is important to track the resources and the ones from 1978 where appropriate. A great concern is that inventory seems to have been ignored. Previously listed buildings appear to have been dropped completely, although their significance is great. Examples include the 1860 Central Hotel, which is housing, and the late 1920s Art Deco Albert Building Annex. And one completely ignored is the Boy, Girl, and Sea Scout headquarters at 739A at 2nd. That's a beautiful and very unusual building. In Chapter 5, the sub-area graphics should be illustrated by a color that is listed that was listed on that original inventory. In some places, but not all, these original listings were indicated by a large black star, which has a jarring effect, and not all are shown. If they no longer qualify, an explanation should be given as to why they have lost value. We disagree with upgrading some of the buildings, such as the highly altered Wilkin building, which was built as an office building, or the international style 740A. 1565 Fourth is definitely a more interesting example. The user friendliness of the document needs help. It is difficult to follow the process. It seems to jump all over the place, and I suggest that using that Redwood City Downtown Precise Plan as an example of a clearly formulated document. The city, finally, should use all preservation exactions to support preservation goals, not to give the funds away. Elements such as updating the inventory, supporting a historic resource advisory committee, funding landmark designations, interpretive signage, and similar preservation activities should be the purpose of these funds. I did want to agree with the person who earlier you were reading a note that the colors on some of the maps are too subtle to show the definitions. I'd prefer if there were more difference, not all lavenders and blues. Thank you.
And I do not see any more. Oh, let's see. I do see one more person on here. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Kate Powers. I also served on this General Plan Steering Committee. I just had a couple of quick comments. I wanted to agree with Bill Carney's comments. I think one thing that will make the downtown pretty successful is having a public realm that works well, that we have spaces in the public realm that kind of connect from one to the other. I have mentioned before to Opticos that the streets, I forget which image it was, but I think it was the public realm part of the plan, shows green trees all the way along some of the streets. And I'm not sure that the sidewalks along there, along those streets, are wide enough to have street trees and include the kind of image that shows people walking along a broad sidewalk with tree-lined sidewalk. I think the images should really reflect what kind of green spaces we will have downtown on the public realm page. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I do worry about the 90-foot height limit, which would be possible in the along the highway. 90 feet. We were told that by one of the participants on the steering committee that the highway is 21 feet. So that's going to be 7 stories above the highway with the height bonuses. And while we do want to create a dense, not overcrowded, but kind of a vibrant and some density downtown, I think that's huge. 9-story buildings, at least, in that downtown area is kind of uncomfortable. I remember hearing during an urban design class that 4 stories allowed people to still see people down on the street level, and there was a relational thing to that, whereas people look like ants if you're at 7, 8, or 9 stories. So I'm not sure that's where San Rafael wants to go. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention is that the county in 2007, their adoption of the 2007 countywide plan adopted a Baylands corridor, which basically says that along the Baylands on undeveloped properties, that it allows consideration for adaptation along those. On developed properties along the bay, there are going to have to be hard adaptation solutions in terms of raising levees and things like that, because you have to protect properties. But the properties that are undeveloped are going to be facing future investment in order to protect their properties from adaptation to sea level rise, where they haven't invested already in development. So having something, maybe it's not the precise plan, but maybe it's the general plan that gives some options for both property owners and the city to look at those properties as, especially when the city does its sea level rise adaptation plan, but included in the general plan, included in the downtown precise plan, some flexibility on how property owners in the city can work together on some more natural solutions to adaptation, or other options besides retaining levees in those areas. I think it's really important to be considered. Thank you.
Okay, if there is anyone else wishing to speak, please press star 9 to virtually raise your hand. And I don't see anyone right now. I am going to read, there are a couple of commenters that have added chat. I'm going to go ahead and read those, but I just want to warn that, I can't continue to provide that opportunity. but I am going to do that just for these two. And the first one is from Roger Smith responding to Leslie. I think Leslie is in effect agreeing with me in that the historical resources section needs more public vetting and input to come up with a way to meet the needs for change and for preservation. And then the other commenter is from Donnie Uzarski. Why are we trying to create a larger city? Is it financial? Huge buildings to create boulevards? Why? Can you please discuss the city of San Rafael pensions? Can we please discuss former city politicians as a way to balance budget and possibilities for our city? There is also a chat from Roger Smith. I think got that already. And I'm just looking to see if there's anybody else wishing to speak, and I do not see anyone else.
Thanks, Ali. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and shift the conversation back to the commissioners. So we'll start out with any further questions of clarification. So at this point, let's hold off on comments. Any further points of questions of clarification for either staff or for our consultants based on the public hearing? Hey, let's go person by person so everyone has an opportunity to jump on. I'll just go alphabetically. So I'll start with Commissioner Davidson.
One question I have is in the height density bonuses from the state when you build affordable housing. So the height maps as shown on the plans, they are going to increase. Am I correct? Because if somebody proposes affordable housing and it's entitled to concessions, they can require higher elevations. Am I correct?
Stefan, do you want me to take that?
Sure, Ali, I'd be happy to back you up. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, the density bonus law does allow for concessions and waivers. Concessions are limited to a certain number. Waivers there's not really a limit as long as the applicant or / developer can demonstrate that whatever height limit we've established is precluding him from developing the affordable housing at the densities that he's requesting. And then the other question was just how to deal with density. I think you were asking with heights. The density bonus right now is related to density, and the way and Stefan, you can you tell me if I'm speaking out of line here, but the way that would work with the downtown precise plan is because you're getting that density bonus height, that's the way we're dealing with the density bonus.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hill, any follow-up questions?
Mine were mostly comments, so if it's best for me to reserve them till later, Chair Samudzi, I can do that.
Okay, yeah, we'll hit up the comments next. Commissioner Lubomirsky?
I'm good. I'll just go with comments.
Commissioner Mercado?
Commissioner Davidson, thanks for the wanting clarification on the concession issue or the height issue. That was one I had. The other one is, I think it'd be good just to establish for the record, there's sounds like some questions and concerns from the public on input regarding the historical component. And I don't remember if Stefan at the beginning you talked about the engagement with the community, how that section may have been particularly addressed or presented to the public. But if not now, at some point, I think before we close this item, I'd recommend maybe just expressing what was done there.
Sure, thank you, Chair Mercado. And Ali, I might ask for your assistance with this, but I can get this started a little bit. And I think it's good also just to maybe clarify with regards to historic resources. I believe that some of the comments during the public hearing may have been directed to some of the content that had been provided in an earlier, what we refer to as a screen check draft to staff. So hopefully, and I could point these out if it is appropriate. This public review draft, I believe, does respond to some of the concerns with regards to balancing historic preservation and new development potential in the downtown area. The process for determining the historic resources that are reflected on the map in Chapter 5 was an extensive one because it required the in-person review of 572 properties in the downtown area and input on the DPR form. And that was actually a process that was done by a consultant member of our team, a historic preservation specialist, and architect, Michael Garavaglia, as well as staff and some members of San Rafael Heritage that sort of participated in that process. It was a somewhat arduous process that occurred over many months, and staff in particular devoted considerable hours to the completion of the survey, the results of which have been organized and included in the appendix. I believe what may have been directed during public comment is that there was not an opportunity, or the plan process has not provided an opportunity for public review of the results of those 572 surveys to determine historical opinions or concerns that folks might have on the individual descriptions of buildings or the individual evaluations of buildings. I will say that the process of getting to this map required really a very extensive iterative process between those who prepared the DPR forms and the historic resources consultant team to get to this final map that is sort of included in the precise plan.
I don't have anything to add, but I see that Paul has popped up, and I know he's been heavily involved. So Paul, if there's anything that you would like to add to Stefan's.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much. As I was listening to this, there's another key piece to the downtown precise plan that has not been mentioned tonight, and that is we have published the draft environmental impact report that covers the downtown precise plan and the greater general plan 2040. And that's on the streets right now. And that includes a very detailed section regarding the cultural resources. And there are pieces to that general plan that have been folded into, that pieces in the draft EIR that have been folded into the downtown precise plan, but there are still elements of that EIR that include some recommendations that I think cover some of the gaps that we're talking about. The other thing I did want to mention too is one of the commenters indicated that the plan suggests that we create another cultural affairs or some sort of an advisory commission. That is not the case that we're suggesting. We're just suggesting that as we look at historic resources moving forward, particularly when we're looking at either redeveloping or developing properties that are adjacent to or part of a historic resource, is to carefully look at those and to consult with architectural historians. So I just want to clarify that we're not recommending in the plan the establishment of another committee. So anyway, I just wanted to throw some of those comments in here for you to consider.
Thanks for that. Commission or Vice Chair Prevatelli, any further clarifying questions?
Yeah, just a couple, mostly around the framework for downtown's public realm design. And specifically, I'm looking at figure 4.10, the map, which is beautiful, by the way. I'm wondering if, I was hoping to see a few more parks and plazas required in the design, but I see that there are a number of green dots that are recommended locations. And I was wondering if you could describe, Stefan, you could, or Ali, you could describe what it means by recommended locations, what the idea is there.
Stefan, I'll go ahead and let you, I think you're more familiar with that element of the plan. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and thanks, Vice Chair Prevatelli, for that question. So the plan does recommend on figure 4.10 some proposed locations for civic spaces in the downtown, but it also recognizes that their land that is publicly available to establish civic spaces is limited. And so what the plan does is it does pay attention to the establishment of public spaces where there is the potential today, either through the creation of plazas, such as the Transit Plaza, the promenade that's sort of described in the Montecito area, for example, other components of the public realm that can rely on the improvement of public spaces. And then with regards to other potential opportunities, it anticipates that privately owned public space can be potentially set aside through the creation of new development. Mm-hmm. And that actually is connected to a series of standards in the form-based code that as projects get larger, they have actually requirements to set aside a portion of that project as publicly accessible open space that would come in the form of street-facing plazas or courtyards, for example, that can, over time, increase the amount of public space within the downtown area.
Okay, great. That's excellent. Thank you very much. The next question I had, and I'll try to be brief, I just have two more questions, was around solar access. I noticed that the smart train transit area that is designated as a proposed civic space has some very tall buildings around it, including what seemed to be a very tall building to the south. I was wondering if solar access and shading had been considered in the plan.
It was considered with regards to where heights would generally be distributed within the downtown. And of course, it was primarily considered with regards to the heights of buildings as they relate to streets. I would say that a more detailed analysis of what sun might do to, and shade might do, particularly to sort of impact spaces in certain times of the day, that is an issue that just simply hasn't been looked at because it occurs at a level of detail that I think is beyond what sort of plan like this can do. There are absolutely considerations, particularly for larger projects that might have an opportunity to provide this additional analysis as part of a discretionary review process, particularly sort of in these areas where buildings, for example, might be proposed asking for a height bonus or asking for a height that, is beyond the base height that is expected in the plan. So I think that there would be an opportunity to consider some of those elements on a case-by-case basis. I would probably also say that, the plan tries to establish a balance between providing an envelope to accommodate new intensity and some of these sort of environmental factors which we experience in cities with regards to things like solar access. And so San Rafael absolutely has a fantastic climate. And we are in a situation where sunlight can absolutely reach these spaces when we are thinking about buildings of this height, particularly at key moments of the day. But the issues that typically arise are much more detailed with regards to, is sun reaching spaces during the months when the sun is low in the sky at certain hours of the day when that sunlight might actually be desirable. And those things actually can start to impact how those spaces are used, but it tends to be on a sort of a temporal basis, how effective sort of a plaza might be between 9 and 10 a.m. or 8 and 10 a.m. 2 to 3 months out of the year, as opposed to a situation that creates darkness or shade or canyon effects that we see in districts where buildings are considerably taller that have impacts of a much greater degree.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then my last question, hopefully this is an easy one. So on figure 6.18, the bicycle priority network, it took me a while to figure out what was going on here, but I got a sense that there's good flow in both the north-south and also east-west directions. But there is this dotted line along 2nd Street that says bicycles may use sidewalk on the south side. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. So there's been sort of a lot of discussion about how to move bicycles east-west through the project area.
Yeah.
And this was sort of developed with the understanding that because 4th Street is such a high quality pedestrian realm, and the decision was made to not prioritize a designated bicycle facility in the form of bike lane on 4th Street, that the network for moving bicycles through downtown would be to actually shift along E and A Street between the 2nd Street corridor as it moves from the West End towards the Transit Center up to 5th Street, and to take 5th Street across to the Transit Center and to the Montecito area. But 5th Street is sort of recognized in the plan that in order to really get a high quality bicycle facility on 5th Street, you likely are going to need to remove some on-street parking, which was seen as sort of being, that decision was sort of seen as being beyond the scope of this plan in terms of what it needed in terms of further study. So the idea of making improvements to the sidewalk along 2nd Street, where the sidewalk could become more of a multi-use path, was something that also was sort of considered here for further study. In order to sort of eliminate that need to sort of make that shift in the north-south direction to basically move freely, it would allow bicycles who are traveling along that corridor anyway, to continue along that path of least resistance and to connect up to other bicycle facilities that sort of head to other destinations. That's kind of where we landed with that. There's been a lot of discussion through this process, of course, about the quality of 2nd and 3rd Street and just how much traffic they sort of need to accommodate and what can be done about them. And we really moved away from doing more than focusing on the sidewalk improvements that have been designated through the recent programs in terms of making it a safer environment for pedestrians, because right now it's just not a conducive bicycle environment. And it is not a situation where we could justify taking away travel lanes to increase bicycle capacity to allow that sort of direct east-west connection to occur.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So at this point, we're going to jump into the discussion phase. And the way that I want to structure the conversation here is, let's break it out into two sections instead of going chapter by chapter. What I want to do is just lump comments for chapters essentially 3 through 7 in one, and then conversation for 8, the implementation section, in another. And so what I'll do is I'll just open up the floor, and if you would, for any comments that you have in terms of either additions, subtractions, etc., just please clearly outline to which of the chapters between chapters 1 and 7 you're referring to, just so it's clear from our note taking what specific section you're referring to, and then we'll do the same thing for chapter 8. So we'll start with opening up the floor. So anyone who wants to jump in and start making comments, feel free to do so.
Sure, Samisi. I don't have it broken down that way. I just have my comments in a general form. So Allie is incredible, and I'm sure she can figure out which one to put them in. But this won't take long. Let's see. So transit center relocation. Who knows how long Golden Gate Transit, the state, the federal government, who knows? So I think you guys did a great job figuring out, don't touch it until you know what it is. My own opinion is that leave it where it is. Smartle, the 2 trains a day, work around it. 5th Street bike lane seems like a really good solution versus even touching 2nd or 3rd Street or even 4th Street, which I would like to see as a couple blocks of 4th Street being a pedestrian only. No buses, no bikes, no anything. If they wander through, it's fine, but use 5th as the east-west connector, if you will, for the bike lane. Don't mess with trees and don't mess with old houses, because people love those things. So you're not gonna make anyone happy with the houses, historical houses, and trees. And in this case, bikes, I think too. San Rafael would be instead of trees, we worry about bikes. I think it'd be great if we had a historical district, but I know that comes, like Roger said, Roger has been through the wars. He was on the 2000 with me, and we got to get some ownership. We got, the homeowners, the business owners, they have to have some voice maybe if it gets to the point where we consider a historic district, because that can be fraught with a lot of problems. But I think it's great when you have the cute little wayfinding signs, and it wouldn't, we're one of the few communities, I guess, Larkspur maybe, that have historical numbers. Let's see. Like I said, 4th Street, I'd like to see, around maybe a block or 2 east of A, pedestrian all the time. Again, it just seems like we're bending over a whole lot for bikes. Bikes are great, but it seems like we're putting them in front of people and cars, which sometimes is a challenge. I think and I will have much to say about the height. I'm not even going to touch the height, but I think it's ridiculous. I think it's too bad they're not building on Lincoln and 2nd, Lincoln and 3rd, because that building I think is going to be 90 feet, 94 feet if I'm wrong. I think when it goes up, people are going to go, whoa, that was a terrible idea. And then to encourage it a block, 2 blocks either side of it, you're going to end up going through a tunnel on the freeway. It will be horrific. If again, build out probably won't occur for 20 or 30 years, but if by allowing that kind of height, I think is a terrible, terrible mistake, even though it's near transit. Okay. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Commissioner Smizzi, if I may. I'm going to hit my top 5. I actually wrote down 13 things, but I'll save those for later. If they're too small, I may just, if with permission, I'll just send them separately so as not to occupy our time here. So first of all, I am very impressed. Thank you, Barry, Stefan, and team for putting this together. Very broad and deep and nuanced. So thank you for that attention. Similar comment to the general plan. I think I would love to see almost like a document traceability. I know Chapter 10, the glossary, does have an inventory of documentation. I think it would be great to, and I don't expect it to be done until it's closer to completion, just because traceability, I think, is very difficult to do when it's in draft form. Metrics, I think we've discussed this, I think, as a commission, that we generally want more clarification on metrics. On the general plan, Barry, I thought that the team did a great job of pulling forward potential metrics. I think, I know it's mentioned in section 8.4 here, but I think it could be more prominently kind of written out. Timing, it gives general guidance that it's going to look to expected outcomes in Chapter 3 as guidance, but I think, I hope that they can actually expand a little bit further. Like, for example, the mix of pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicles in downtown, I think would be a great metric to understand over time, not necessarily asserting a goal, but even just to have measurement. The third thing I saw in section 7.4, there's a objective design development standards for by right development under the SB 35 legislation. It just said it's to be done. I guess I'm not asking a specific question, but I'd love to, if I could solicit a comment on what that looks like, because I can imagine that can be a really big placeholder. So I just want to get a little bit of amplification on what that means.
Chair Samouti, Stefan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, free-form discussion. So if it's directed at Stefan, he can step in.
Sure, I'd be happy to sort of give a little bit of background there. Of course, SB 35 is a state law that provides a streamlined, we use the term by right development process for certain kinds of affordable housing projects. If an SB 35 project is proposed, it is subject to an administrative approval that needs to follow a very strict timeline. So the state is basically looking for jurisdictions to establish objective design standards that can basically allow for the approval of these kinds of projects that will not have the benefit of discretionary review. In many ways, what we have in Chapter 9 is that the form-based code is establishing an objective standards framework for projects. It is set up in such a way that should projects be proposed as by right projects, the regulatory framework in Chapter 9 can be used for that purpose. I believe that this reference in Chapter 7 has to do with the procedure that an SB 35 type project would need to undergo, because of course, those projects today, when they are proposed in the downtown area, have the benefit of the review and approval of the Planning Commission, but projects subject to SB 35 would not require that discretionary approval.
Got it. So thank you. That was helpful. The reference to the form-based code. I'll go fourth and fifth, and then I'll try to limit the rest. There was one reference to the word autonomous vehicle, or phrase rather, in Chapter 6, and then you go to Chapter 10, and it's actually very expansive. I was actually pretty impressed that on the amount of detail and consideration for the likely impacts of autonomous vehicles on our community. Specifically, I wanted to call out that it was noted that there could eventually be a reduction 40 to 90% of need for parking inventory, which I thought was fascinating. I think could reshape downtown. If anything, I may suggest that it might be worth bringing some of that language forward into Chapter 6. I know it might seem speculative, but I think it does give, I don't know, I thought it was a super important point to be back in the glossary. And then finally, just earlier comments around 4th Street. I know there's a desire to see closure, or suggesting if it's permanent or temporary. I think certainly in the context of innovation and pilot projects, I think that would be great to maybe make that a priority in that section at a minimum exploration. But I've seen as an experiment that even before that, farmers market and dining under lights has been, I think, incredibly popular. So at a minimum, the idea of operationalizing the temporary aspect of it would be great. I had more, but I will yield to the rest, and the smaller things can be brought back separately. I can submit them separately. Thank you.
Okay. Get fast. Okay. So Chapter 2, I think it would be great to mention some of the historical context around music and agriculture, particularly because I think we have a goal of increasing the number of restaurants and music venues downtown. And as people know, the Grateful Dead is from here. Also Metallica, and we have Crossroads as a great example of bands coming into the area. So I think mentioning that resource as a benefit would be great. And then there are obviously great farm to table opportunities because we have some of the best agriculture in the world just next door. I love the idea of having the outdoor rooms. I think that's fabulous, and I think that's really conducive to both of those those forms of entertainment. Let's see here. Just fast forwarding through some of my other stuff here. Chapter 4. I noticed that the Montecito development is a very long-term goal, and that made sense to me. I hesitate even mentioning this, but if there's anything more that we could do for that area, I think that would be useful. I don't really have a good idea for any sort of near-term improvements to that area, but it seemed like it was a little lacking compared to the rest of the downtown area. Let's see here, Chapter 5, historic preservation. I really like the idea of having, I know this is very controversial, but I really like the idea of having a historical preservation commission created to sort of better regulate and process the applications. I agree that the inventory seems like it could be improved based on the public comment in collaboration with the public, with landowners and people who are associated with special interest groups. One thing I'll notice that right now, I feel like there is some bias that is introduced into individual applications because building owners and developers hire the architectural preservation consultants to provide reports on a per project basis. And I think it would be good to try to, if possible, take that bias out of the process by having the Historical Preservation Commission and also the inventory. Chapter 6, I think it would be interesting to consider some Class 4, I think they're called cycle tracks along 2nd or 3rd. Don't know if there's room for that, but it seems like that would solve a problem. As a person who's a bicyclist, I like to go fast. I like to get through places as quickly as possible. Don't like hills when I need to get somewhere. So food for thought there. Let's see one more. Oh yes, also on chapter 6, I'd love to see more mention of EV charging stations for both cars and actually EV bicycles, which I think is which is already a popular trend. I don't recall seeing very much mention, if any, of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the transportation chapter. So those are my comments. I guess the last thing I'll say is great work. I think this is amazing. I really look forward to living here and seeing this happen and experiencing the, not just the final product, but the incremental product of your work. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stefan, and your team.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments on the first 7 chapters before we move on to the implementation chapter?
I have one on chapter 3, 49, 7E. It has to do, in my mind, with how are we going to deal with adapting to sea level rise? And when I read 7E, it's telling us that, okay, we're going to update the building code and we're going to require structural adaptation to withstand this flood inundations. And we already studied sea level rise. It's coming. It's going to affect downtown. And as a planning commissioner and as my role as an engineer approving plans, we don't have any policies or codes in place that we can impose into these developments to accommodate sea level rise. And I feel that there's a huge component that's missing because we have studied sea level rise, we know what's happening, but we haven't developed any adaptation plans, any concrete projects that are going to help us, not only with the buildings, but the supporting infrastructure, the roads and the sidewalks and the underground utilities. So I guess it's a comment / question. So at what point will we get there? Because I know the plan says we're going to adapt, but without having concrete set of adaptation rules that we can impose into development, we can't. Like as a planning commissioners, as plan reviewers, we have nothing to impose on this development. So how do we deal with that?
Can I start? I'll jump in real quick and then maybe have Paul or Barry join. But sea level rise is obviously a bigger picture than just addressing it in a smaller downtown precise plan area. And I know that we have been doing some work around that or has started talking about what that work will look like. There has been we have released the draft EIR already, and I believe there's some information in the draft EIR about sea level rise that you'll be able to look at. Paul or Barry, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I would like to add a couple of comments, and I think this is a really serious topic, and it's global to the whole city. And if you may recall in reviewing the draft General Plan 2040, there are 7 policies and I think close to 15 programs in the greater general plan on how to address and to deal with sea level rise, either through adaptation or finding ways to work around it. And so it's going to be something that's got to be looked at a greater level. And then those tools are going to have to be applied to downtown. So for us to sort of step forward and expect some of those tools to be in place with this specific plan right now might be a bit premature because it's something that's going to have to be addressed with our greater general plan and a greater plan or an adaptation plan dealing with it at the citywide level. So, but there's some low-hanging fruit in some of the things that we're recommending in the greater general plan that can be applied to downtown. For example, in areas that are subject to sea level rise, there's a recommendation to require a higher building, a finished floor elevation, or to deal with some of these other things on a more granular level. And they will end up coming down to a level of looking at this on a case-by-case basis in the downtown area. But I think it's really a greater task for the city for the whole general plan in itself. So, and Barry, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
No, I've got a few comments which I'll add later on the historic resources information, but not on sea level rise. I think you guys have handled that one.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit to Chapter 8, which is the implementation section. The reason why I split this one off is that I think it has, I think this is where the entire plan, where the rubber meets the road. So I think it bears sort of further merit to kind of go through how this is structured and any particular questions we might have around that. So again, I'll open up the floor and feel free to jump in if you do have additional comments or questions you want to ask in this space. All right, I'll jump in. I do actually have three specific areas that I think are worth mentioning in terms of kind of food for thought for both consultants and planning team. I'll break these into essentially the attractiveness of San Rafael. The second is the strategic and economic importance of San Rafael. And the third is introducing some kind of measure for value add or sort of financial benefit of each of the different prioritized steps within the implementation section. So jumping into the attractiveness bit of San Rafael, I think this is more to do with sort of understanding the impact and how we are addressing or segmenting sort of our market of impact between the incumbents within San Rafael, both developer, business, as well as residents, and newcomers or potential newcomers. Because I think that one thing that the plan does very well is express the overall desires of the community as collaboratively, I guess, just generated and put into thought. But I think it does bear mentioning some sort of self-awareness of the city in terms of how we appear to the very people that we wish to retain and attract going forward, particularly with the impact of COVID. I know that was a big wild card that is kind of difficult to plan around, but I think some very important points that are called out within this presentation are the fact that even prior to COVID, we've seen a plateauing of sales tax revenue from retail. And given that retail is a centerpiece of the economic plans, I think it bears very important for us at least to put some numbers or some definition around the pieces that we are intending to implement. To what extent are we really actually driving additional value to the city as measured by something like tax revenue? Because I think that's really going to help us understand and prioritize how realistic are some of the goals and aspirations that we have relative to fundamentally supporting the city's ongoing ability to provide services to the community, as well as the city's ability to attract more of the businesses as well as the residents whose, from a business perspective, sales tax revenue, payroll tax, things like that, and as well as sort of the ecosystem effects are going to help drive value to specifically the downtown area. And then from the standpoint of new residents, the disposable income that's necessary to, again, continue to support the retail. So we need to call out sort of what elements of San Rafael are actually going to be able to attract those folks and how implementation can directly sort of track to expected new tax dollars in over, whatever the evaluation period is. And then second, which is tied into that, is reference to the strategic importance of San Rafael to the Marin and to the Bay Area economy. In conversations that I've had with a few stakeholder groups within San Rafael, some of the biggest pointers were the transit center as well as the intersection of highways. So I think, again, these are things that are well known, but I think it's important for us to understand and measure the effect that these specific advantageous features of our geography and our sort of regional transit infrastructure actually have. Again, in order to assess the priority of some of these various, as we've seen in today's discussion, sort of competing interests, specifically around new growth versus historical, we can really have some objective standard of saying that, yeah, this is sort of the additional tax revenue that we need to generate. And this is the set of things that we want to implement that will help us get there. And that can help us then sort of potentially play Tetris with some of the competing interests that have been expressed by the community. And then third, again, this all boils down to profitability towards the city. I know that sometimes it's a dirty word for many people to think about, but again, the city's ability to, retain staff, the city's ability to, invest from a budget standpoint in a lot of the different services that the community relies upon comes down to profitability. So I think it's very important for us to establish some sort of metric when we look at each of the implementation points to assess and understand how they're going to contribute to the expected increase in tax revenue in year 1 through year X. Now, I do have some recommendations on how to calculate those metrics, and I can share that. Ali, with staff and with the other planning folks on the call today. It doesn't have to be that, but I think that it's important for us to have at least something that we can use to kind of measure and evaluate, say, expected contribution to future growth or something along those lines. So those are the comments that I have. If there are any additional sort of comments or thoughts on any of that, that'd be love to hear that.
Any additional comments on your comments other than I agree with you? I'll just mention, I kind of expected when I opened up the implementation section to see a schedule, but I totally understand that there's so many things, there's so many variables, so many projects at play here that it's really difficult to put them in order and apply a schedule. And so I understand, the benefit of, putting in the timing and the priority, 2020 to 2030, 2030 to 2040. But I guess I would just pose the question, do you think that it may be feasible to at least apply sort of like a high level schedule of which category of projects or which groups of projects may be done like first, second, third? Is that just not even a pragmatic approach because there's so many variables?
I would say, if I can just add staff's perspective, you always plan on projects moving forward, but it's really hard to get to that point. As an example, there are a number of housing projects that we have approved over the past several years that we had anticipated would continue moving forward, and we had hoped would continue moving forward, but they haven't. And so the best that we can do is to try to plan and to try to, find ways to, simplify without sacrificing quality and things that are meaningful to San Rafael. But yeah, it's difficult to really project what a private property owner is going to do.
Yeah. How about with the public projects?
I would like to add a couple of comments on that. One of the things that's real important about the implementation chapter is that it's a check-in. Not only do we look to prioritize those projects, but like the general plan, we're supposed to visit this every year and take a look at that, and that helps to craft the city council's goals and objectives based on resources, funding, community interest and things of that nature. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, because moving forward in 5 years, there may be something that's a high priority item on the list today, but it may not be. It may be trumped by, I'm sorry I said that. It may be, let's just say there may be other items on the list that may be a higher priority in 5 years. So I think that check-in is real critical to make sure that, we keep this fresh. Because, you can go on and we could say, oh, this is high priority, and it doesn't get implemented for 10 years. And that's kind of frustrating. So I think it's just important that we make sure we respect that 1-year review.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that. I think this is a snapshot. And so to Chair Samutsi's point of the matrix and sort of those check-ins, those are really critical. I would look at those as part of the snapshot that's going to happen every year under either the precise plan or the general plan or both. One of the things generally that I think is missing is this is intimidating, probably for a lot of people. And so what I didn't really hear tonight, at least I don't think I did, was why we're doing this, connected to the general plan, connected to really what's happening from Sacramento, and the fact that through SB 35 and future housing bills that are coming down, that local discretion is being eroded. And so I think that is somewhat missing, either in the presentation or in the community engagement or as part of the implementation discussion. It's a bit granular, but I just feel like there's an emotional component. That's what I heard from the historical folks, and there's a change happening, and this is reflective of that change. And I think it's critical, but I also think that emotion behind it should be identified somewhere, either validated or challenged or however we want to do it. But I think an acknowledgement would help the community understand it. But overall, props. I mean, this is hard. And driving through downtown every day and seeing empty storefronts and not knowing what school will look like, really hard to try to create a plan around that. So great job to everybody.
Do we have other further comments? Okay, hearing none. At this point, I'm going to ask whether other commissioners have a motion, and the motion I'd be looking for at this point would be to accept the report and continue the meeting to January 26, 2021 to provide further feedback. Do I hear a motion?
Chair Samutsi,
Yeah.
before you make the motion, there were just a couple of things I was hoping I could add, and it would be a good segue into the motion to continue. I wanted to acknowledge that we have received a few letters from the public on the draft precise plan, one from the Golden Gate Highway Transportation Bridge District, one from San Rafael Heritage, one from Responsible Growth Marin, and another from Sustainable San Rafael. And I believe we've distributed those letters to you, and we'll be considering those comments and preparing responses similar to what we did with the general plan. Also, to Paul's point earlier, the EIR for both the general plan and the downtown precise plan was posted to the city's website at sanrafael2040.org on January 7th, and that begins a state legislative review period, and that period will end on March 9th. So for those who are watching this program, the document is available at sanrafael2040.org. There is a dedicated page called Environmental Review, and that includes the entire EIR. It's almost 800 pages, so there's a lot to go through, but there is a summary at the beginning and a lot of data about the city and the impacts of both the general plan and the downtown plan. Last, I just wanted to say with respect to historic, I'm glad to hear both Leslie and Roger talking about the importance of reviewing that information. We released this document on December 23rd with the expectation that we will now have a public review of the data in that document. That is not a done deal. The list in that appendix, which by the way is also available on sanrafael2040.org. It's a working list, and we are open to your comments, both from San Rafael Heritage, from property owners, from businesses, about whether your property should be on that list or shouldn't be on that list. we understand that there is a level of subjectivity in that and are really open and welcome to comments on the data that's been presented. We do have a dedicated page on sanrafael2040.org to historic resources that specifically contains all of the data that was collected through this effort. And I would encourage those who are interested to go to that page, look at the summary report, look at the draft. They're called DPR forms for the historic properties. There's a document in there that has almost 160 properties profiled with an explanation of why it was determined that they were historic or not historic. And we, again, if you want to comment on that and say you got it wrong, we don't agree, we're open to that and welcome to that. This process is going to go on for at least 3 more months with the commission. And it's during that time we hope to resolve some of the issues around properties being on or off that list. And I would encourage both San Rafael Heritage, the business community, and property owners to please get in touch with me. My contact information is on the website, and provide that comment or give a call. Thanks.
Actually, I had a question on one thing Barry had said. I did not see the letter from the Golden Gate Bridge Transportation Highway District. Did that come through on our packets, or is that?
It may not have. I think it was at this point, that's an internal letter. It's more of an FYI. I don't know that we forwarded it yet. It was a fairly short letter about the width the width necessary for buses on some of those roads in the vicinity of the transit center. And we will provide that. I think it was more for staff at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question regarding a point of clarification prior to accepting the report. Are we accepting the report as a draft where some of the comments that we've talked about this evening and received from the public may be considered, or how is that going to be, how are the comments going to be handled?
I think in the same way that we did for the general plan, at this point, you're accepting the informational report only, and then we will prepare, we'll digest the comments and the commission's feedback. And that's the purpose of the meeting in February, is really to come back to you and say, here's how we're proposing to modify the document to reflect what we heard from the commission and from the public.
Thank you. I'll make the motion to accept the report.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Second.
I heard
Second.
I heard Vice Chair Previtali made the motion, and I heard Commissioner Mercado made the second.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I think we've done some pretty exhaustive discussion. So staff, we can move into roll call at this point.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Lubomirsky?
Yes.
Commissioner Mercado?
Yes.
Vice Chair Previtali?
Yes.
Chair Samuzzi?
Yes.
Did I get everybody? I think I got everybody.
All right, awesome. Good work, everybody. That was a very meaty item, but I think that's been some very rich discussion, and I look forward to our follow-up meeting where we'll go over, I believe, section 9, and then into February when we get the final report. So next we'll move into the director's report, and I'll kick it back over to Ali.
Thank you. I just have a couple of items. As Barry mentioned, our next meeting is going to be January 26th, where you will have a presentation on the form-based code. I also wanted to just reiterate that we have released the draft EIR. It has been released for a 60-day public review period. We are accepting comments until March 9th, and we will continue to accept comments through the Planning Commission meeting. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that we have, as you know, we've been working on trying to revise our accessory dwelling unit ordinance. In the middle of trying to revise it, the state, flipped or actually added more legislation and more regulations, or at least reduced the number of regulations. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and really kind of looked at our code. And I think that you're going to be really pleased. The draft has been released. It's on our website at cityofsanrafael.org /ADU. Let me just double check /draft-ADU. Take a look at it. If you have individual comments, there's a place that you can provide those comments and they'll go directly to me or Michelle again. And then we'll be, addressing those and bringing those to your planning commission sometime in, I think we were talking about February. So yeah, and that's all I have.
Okay, that's some great things to look forward to. Now I'll ask any commissioners if they have any other communication that they'd like to share with the rest of the panel.
I'm sorry I was late, but did we all congratulate Allie on her new title? Did that happen? Bigger office, more money, all that stuff, Allie? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
I am happy that Rafi's former office now is very much in order. In fact, I'm going to take a picture of it and send it to him.
That's going to be a good year. Yeah. So any other comments? And hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.